Welcome to one of the most disturbing and mysterious cases ever recorded in the annals of Montana Territory. Before we begin this haunting tale that will challenge everything you think you know about frontier romance, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and what time of day or night you're listening to this account. We're fascinated to know how far these documented stories reach and when they find their audience across the globe. In the harsh winter of 1881, in the remote mining town of Silver Creek, Montana Territory, a simple mail-order bride arrangement would spiral into a nightmare that defied all explanation. This is the documented account of what became known as the Silver Creek Incident, a story that begins with hope and romance, but ends with revelations so disturbing that the truth was buried for nearly a century. The year was 1881. Montana Territory had been established for just 17 years, and the promise of gold and silver continued to draw desperate men to its unforgiving mountains and valleys. The Northern Pacific Railroad was slowly making its way across the territory, but vast stretches remained isolated, accessible only by horseback or wagon train. It was in these remote places that civilization wore its thinnest veneer, and where the line between hope and horror could disappear in a single winter night. Silver Creek was one of those places where men came to reinvent themselves or to disappear entirely. Nestled in a narrow valley between towering peaks, the town had sprung up around a silver strike in 1878. By 1881, it boasted a population of nearly 300 souls, most of them men who had left their pasts behind in search of fortune in the frozen ground. The town consisted of a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a general store, 2 saloons, a boarding house, and a small church that doubled as a schoolhouse. The buildings were constructed hastily from rough-hewn timber, designed more for function than comfort. In winter, when snow could pile 8 feet deep and temperatures could drop to 40 below zero, Silver Creek became an island of humanity in a sea of white death. It was into this isolated world that our story begins, with a man named Jeremiah Blackwood. According to territorial records and contemporary accounts from the Silver Creek Gazette, Blackwood was a prosperous mine owner who had arrived in the territory in 1879. Unlike many of the rough miners and drifters who populated the town, Blackwood was described as a gentleman of education and refinement. Standing over 6 feet tall with dark hair and piercing blue eyes, Blackwood cut an impressive figure in the rough mining town. He owned the most productive silver mine in the area, employed nearly 50 men, and lived in the finest house in Silver Creek, a 2-story structure with glass windows and a stone fireplace that was the envy of every resident. Yet for all his success and prominence, Jeremiah Blackwood was a lonely man. At 35 years of age, he had never married, and the isolation of frontier life weighed heavily upon him. The few unmarried women in Silver Creek were either already spoken for or unsuitable for a man of his standing. It was this loneliness that led him to place an advertisement in a Chicago newspaper in the autumn of 1881. The advertisement, preserved in the archives of the Chicago Tribune, read simply, "Successful mine owner in Montana Territory seeks refined lady for marriage. Must be of good character and willing to embrace frontier life. Serious inquiries only. References required." What the advertisement did not mention were the specific requirements that Blackwood had confided to his closest friend, the town's doctor, Marcus Henley. According to Dr. Henley's journal, discovered decades later in his family's papers, Blackwood had very particular ideas about the kind of woman he wanted to marry. She had to be young, preferably under 25, with no family ties that might interfere with their life together. Most importantly, she had to be someone who would not be missed if she were to disappear from her previous life. These requirements, which Dr. Henley found disturbing even at the time, would prove to be more significant than anyone could have imagined. The doctor's journal entries from this period reveal his growing unease about his friend's behavior and his concerns about what Blackwood might be planning. The response to Blackwood's advertisement was overwhelming. Letters arrived from across the Midwest, from young women seeking escape from poverty, spinsterhood, or unhappy family situations. Blackwood spent weeks reading through these letters, studying the photographs that accompanied them, and carefully evaluating each potential bride according to his mysterious criteria. The woman he eventually selected was named Catherine Whitmore, a 23-year-old seamstress from a small town in Illinois. According to her letters, which were later found among Blackwood's papers, Catherine was an orphan who had been supporting herself through her needlework since the age of 16. She had no family, few friends, and was eager for the chance to start a new life in the West. Catherine's photograph, a formal studio portrait typical of the era, showed a young woman of striking beauty. She had auburn hair, large dark eyes, and delicate features that suggested both intelligence and determination. Her letters revealed an educated mind and a romantic spirit that was drawn to the adventure of frontier life. The correspondence between Blackwood and Catherine continued for several months, with letters traveling back and forth between Montana and Illinois. Blackwood's letters, copies of which were preserved in his personal papers, painted an idyllic picture of life in Silver Creek. He described his comfortable home, his successful business, and the natural beauty of the Montana landscape. Catherine's responses revealed her growing excitement about the prospect of marriage and her new life in the West. She wrote about her dreams of having a family, of helping to build a community in the wilderness, and of finding the love and security that had eluded her in her previous life. Her letters were filled with questions about Montana, about Blackwood's mine, and about the life they would build together. What Catherine did not know, and what would not be discovered until decades later, was that Blackwood had been conducting similar correspondences with at least 6 other women during the same period. Each woman believed she was his only prospective bride, and each had been carefully selected according to the same disturbing criteria that had troubled Dr. Henley. The arrangements for Catherine's journey to Montana were made with meticulous care. Blackwood sent money for her train fare and detailed instructions for the route she should take. She was to travel by rail to Billings, then take the stage to Silver Creek, a journey that would take nearly a week in the harsh winter conditions. Catherine's departure from Illinois was noted in the local newspaper, which ran a brief item about the young seamstress who was traveling to Montana to marry a successful mine owner. The article mentioned that she had sold all her possessions and had no plans to return, a detail that would prove significant in the investigation that would follow. The journey to Montana was arduous and dangerous. Catherine's letters to a friend in Illinois, mailed from various stops along the route, described the challenges of winter travel and her growing excitement as she approached her destination. Her final letter, sent from Billings just before she boarded the stage to Silver Creek, was filled with anticipation and hope. "Tomorrow I begin the final leg of my journey to my new life," she wrote. "Mr. Blackwood has promised to meet me at the stage station, and we are to be married within the week. I confess to some nervousness, as any bride would feel, but I am confident that I have made the right decision. Montana may be wild and dangerous, but it offers opportunities that would never be available to a woman of my circumstances in Illinois." Catherine arrived in Silver Creek on December 15, 1881, on the weekly stage from Billings. The stage driver, a man named Tom Morrison, later testified that she was the only passenger on that particular run, and that she seemed excited but nervous about her arrival. She carried 2 large trunks containing all her worldly possessions, and wore a traveling dress of dark blue wool that she had made herself. Jeremiah Blackwood was indeed waiting at the stage station when Catherine arrived. Witnesses described their first meeting as cordial but somewhat formal, which was not unusual for couples who had never met in person. Blackwood helped Catherine with her luggage and escorted her to his carriage for the short ride to his house. The townspeople of Silver Creek were curious about their prominent citizen's mail-order bride, and many found excuses to observe the couple during Catherine's first days in town. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, who ran the general store, later recalled that Catherine seemed like a refined and pleasant young woman, though she appeared somewhat overwhelmed by the roughness of frontier life. Catherine was introduced to the community at a small reception held at the church on December 17th. According to contemporary accounts, she made a favorable impression on the townspeople, who found her to be well-educated and charming. She spoke knowledgeably about literature and music, subjects that were rare topics of conversation in the mining town. Dr. Henley, who attended the reception, noted in his journal that Catherine seemed genuinely fond of Blackwood, though he detected a certain wariness in her manner. "Miss Whitmore appears to be everything that Jeremiah claimed to want in a wife," he wrote. "Yet I cannot shake the feeling that something is not quite right about this arrangement. There is something in Jeremiah's manner when he looks at her that disturbs me, though I cannot put my finger on exactly what it is." The wedding was scheduled for December 22nd, just 1 week after Catherine's arrival. This quick timeline was not unusual for mail-order bride arrangements, as prolonged courtships were often impractical in frontier communities. The ceremony was to be held in the church, with the entire town invited to celebrate. Catherine spent her days before the wedding settling into Blackwood's house and preparing for their life together. She was seen around town shopping for household items and fabric for new dresses. Mrs. Patterson later recalled that Catherine seemed happy but mentioned that she found the house somewhat cold and unwelcoming. "She asked me about decorating ideas," Mrs. Patterson testified years later. "Said the house felt more like a museum than a home. She wanted to make it warmer and more comfortable. I thought it was natural for a new bride to want to put her own touch on things." What the townspeople did not know was that Catherine had made a disturbing discovery during her first night in Blackwood's house. According to a diary that would later be found hidden in her room, she had found evidence that she was not the first woman to have accepted Blackwood's proposal of marriage. Hidden in a drawer in the guest room where she was staying, Catherine had found letters from other women, all responding to what appeared to be the same advertisement that had brought her to Montana. The letters were dated over the previous 2 years and came from women in different states, all expressing their eagerness to become Blackwood's wife. More disturbing still were the personal items that Catherine found scattered throughout the house: a woman's hairbrush in one drawer, a lace handkerchief in another, a small silver locket hidden behind books on a shelf. Each item suggested the presence of another woman, yet Blackwood had assured Catherine that she was his first and only correspondence. Catherine's diary entries from this period, written in a careful hand that revealed her growing anxiety, documented her attempts to understand what had happened to these other women. "I have asked Mr. Blackwood about the items I have found," she wrote, "but he dismisses my concerns, saying they belong to his sister who visited last year. Yet the letters I have seen are clearly from women responding to marriage proposals, not family correspondence." The diary also revealed Catherine's growing unease about Blackwood himself. While he was unfailingly polite and attentive, she sensed something calculating in his manner that made her uncomfortable. "He watches me constantly," she wrote, "as if studying my reactions to everything. When I mention my past or my friends in Illinois, his questions seem designed to confirm that no one will come looking for me if I were to disappear." Despite her growing concerns, Catherine felt trapped by her circumstances. She had sold everything she owned to come to Montana, had no money for return passage, and knew no one in the territory except Blackwood. Her diary entries reveal her internal struggle between her fears and her practical need for security. "I pray that I am simply suffering from pre-wedding nerves," she wrote on December 20th, just 2 days before the scheduled ceremony. "Perhaps all brides feel this way when facing such a momentous change in their lives. Yet I cannot shake the feeling that I am in terrible danger, though I cannot say exactly why." The events of December 21st, the night before the wedding, would prove Catherine's instincts to be tragically accurate. According to the testimony of several witnesses, Catherine was seen that evening walking alone near the church, apparently deep in thought. Mrs. Patterson encountered her around 8 o'clock and noted that the young woman seemed distressed. "She asked me if I knew anything about other women who had come to marry Mr. Blackwood," Mrs. Patterson later testified. "I told her I didn't know what she meant, that she was the first bride he had brought to town. But she seemed convinced that there had been others. She asked me if I had noticed any women's belongings being sold at the general store, or if anyone had mentioned women who had disappeared." Catherine's final diary entry, written late on the night of December 21st, revealed her decision to confront Blackwood about her discoveries. "I cannot go through with this marriage without knowing the truth," she wrote. "Tomorrow morning, before the ceremony, I will demand that he explain the letters and the personal items I have found. If his answers are not satisfactory, I will find a way to leave Silver Creek, regardless of the cost." What happened next would remain a mystery for decades, though the evidence would eventually paint a picture of horror that defied belief. Catherine Whitmore was never seen alive again after retiring to her room on the night of December 21, 1881. The first sign that something was wrong came the next morning when Catherine failed to appear for breakfast. Blackwood, who had been staying at the boarding house to observe the proprieties before the wedding, arrived at his house at 9 o'clock to escort his bride to the church. When she did not answer his calls, he claimed to have found her room empty, with no sign of where she might have gone. The search for Catherine began immediately, with virtually the entire town participating. Her room showed no signs of struggle, and her belongings appeared to be undisturbed. Her wedding dress, a beautiful creation of white silk that she had sewn herself, hung ready in the wardrobe. Her diary was found hidden beneath her mattress, though Blackwood claimed not to have known of its existence. The initial assumption was that Catherine had suffered an attack of nerves and had wandered out into the winter night, perhaps becoming lost in the snow. Search parties scoured the area around Silver Creek, looking for any trace of the missing bride. The temperature had dropped to 20 below zero on the night of her disappearance, and everyone knew that exposure to such conditions would be fatal within hours. Dr. Henley, who had been growing increasingly suspicious of his friend's behavior, conducted his own investigation of Catherine's disappearance. His journal entries from this period reveal his mounting horror as he began to uncover evidence of what had really happened. The doctor's first discovery came when he examined Catherine's room more carefully than the initial searchers had done. Hidden beneath loose floorboards, he found additional letters from women responding to Blackwood's advertisements, dating back more than 3 years. These letters revealed that Blackwood had been corresponding with dozens of women, all of whom believed they were his only prospective bride. More disturbing still were the detailed notes that Blackwood had made about each woman, evaluating them according to criteria that had nothing to do with compatibility or affection. He had noted which women had family who might come looking for them, which had sufficient funds to travel to Montana, and which seemed naive enough to be easily manipulated. Dr. Henley's investigation also uncovered evidence that Catherine was not the first woman to have traveled to Silver Creek to marry Blackwood. Over the previous 3 years, at least 5 other women had made the journey, each believing she was to become his wife. Yet none of these women had ever been seen by the townspeople, and none had ever left Silver Creek alive. The doctor's journal describes his growing realization of the horror that had been taking place under the noses of the entire community. "Jeremiah has been luring these poor women to their deaths," he wrote. "Each one came here believing she was to find love and security, only to meet with some terrible fate. I shudder to think what has become of them all." The evidence suggested that Blackwood had developed a systematic method for disposing of his victims. The women would arrive in Silver Creek during the winter months when travel was most difficult, and when their disappearance could be attributed to the harsh conditions. They would be kept isolated in his house, away from the townspeople who might remember them later. Dr. Henley's investigation revealed that Blackwood had been using a network of accomplices to help him carry out his crimes. The stage driver who brought the women to Silver Creek was being paid extra to ensure that their arrivals were not widely noticed. The telegraph operator was being bribed to intercept any messages that might be sent looking for the missing women. Most shocking of all was the discovery of what had happened to the bodies of Blackwood's victims. Dr. Henley found evidence that the mine owner had been using his silver mine as a disposal site, dropping the bodies into the deepest shafts where they would never be found. The mine's remote location and the dangerous conditions underground made it the perfect place to hide evidence of his crimes. The doctor's journal describes his horror at this discovery. "The very mine that has made Jeremiah wealthy has become a tomb for these innocent women," he wrote. "They came here seeking new lives, only to find death in the darkness beneath the earth. The silver that has brought prosperity to our town has been bought with the blood of the innocent." Armed with this evidence, Dr. Henley faced a terrible dilemma. Blackwood was not only his friend, but also the most powerful man in Silver Creek. The mine owner employed a significant portion of the town's population and had the resources to silence anyone who threatened him. Moreover, the evidence of his crimes was largely circumstantial, and the bodies of his victims were buried where they could never be recovered. The doctor's journal reveals his agonizing decision about what to do with his knowledge. "I know that Jeremiah is a monster," he wrote, "but I also know that accusing him without absolute proof would be futile. He has too much power and influence in this community. I must find a way to stop him that does not depend on the cooperation of local authorities who may be in his pocket." Dr. Henley's solution was both clever and dangerous. Rather than confronting Blackwood directly or attempting to involve local law enforcement, he decided to gather more evidence and then contact federal authorities who would be beyond Blackwood's influence. This plan required him to maintain his friendship with the mine owner while secretly investigating his crimes. The doctor's investigation over the following months revealed the full scope of Blackwood's operation. The mine owner had been advertising for mail-order brides in newspapers across the Midwest, carefully selecting women who met his criteria for victims. He had developed detailed profiles of each woman, learning about their backgrounds, their financial situations, and their family connections. The women who were selected were always those who had no close family ties and limited financial resources. They were typically orphans or women who had been supporting themselves independently, making them less likely to be missed if they disappeared. Blackwood's letters to these women were carefully crafted to create emotional bonds while gathering information that would help him determine their suitability as victims. Dr. Henley's investigation also revealed the psychological profile of a man who was far more dangerous than anyone in Silver Creek had realized. Blackwood was not simply a murderer driven by greed or passion, but a calculating predator who derived satisfaction from the complete control he exercised over his victims. The doctor's journal describes his growing understanding of Blackwood's methodology. "He does not simply kill these women for their money or possessions," Dr. Henley wrote. "He seems to take pleasure in the process of luring them here, of making them believe they have found love and security, and then destroying their hopes completely. It is as if he feeds on their despair." The evidence suggested that Blackwood kept his victims alive for several days after their arrival, during which time he would psychologically torment them by revealing the fate that awaited them. He would show them evidence of the previous victims, explaining in detail how they had died and how their bodies had been disposed of. Only after he had completely broken their spirits would he finally end their lives. Dr. Henley's investigation was complicated by the need to maintain his cover while gathering evidence. He had to continue his friendship with Blackwood, attending social functions and maintaining normal interactions, all while knowing the truth about his friend's crimes. The psychological strain of this deception is evident in his journal entries from this period. "I find it increasingly difficult to look Jeremiah in the eye," he wrote, "knowing what I know about him. Yet I must maintain the pretense of friendship if I am to gather enough evidence to ensure his conviction. Each day that passes, I fear he may be planning to claim another victim." The doctor's fears proved to be well-founded. In the spring of 1882, just months after Catherine's disappearance, Blackwood placed another advertisement in a Chicago newspaper. Dr. Henley, who had been monitoring the mail-order bride publications, immediately recognized the familiar wording and knew that another innocent woman was being lured to her death. This time, however, the doctor was prepared to act. He had spent months gathering evidence and had established contact with federal marshals who were investigating reports of missing persons in the territories. When Blackwood's next victim was selected, Dr. Henley was ready to intervene. The woman who responded to Blackwood's latest advertisement was named Margaret Sullivan, a 24-year-old teacher from Ohio who had lost her position due to budget cuts in her school district. Like Catherine and the other victims, Margaret was alone in the world, with no family to miss her if she disappeared. Dr. Henley's plan was to intercept Margaret before she could reach Silver Creek and to use her as bait to trap Blackwood. Working with federal authorities, he arranged for an undercover female agent to take Margaret's place, while the real Margaret was kept safe in federal custody. The plan required careful coordination and precise timing. The undercover agent, an experienced investigator named Agent Rebecca Morrison, would arrive in Silver Creek posing as Margaret Sullivan. She would be equipped with hidden recording devices and would gather evidence of Blackwood's crimes, while federal agents positioned themselves around the town. Agent Morrison's arrival in Silver Creek on May 15, 1882, appeared to proceed exactly as Blackwood's previous operations had unfolded. The mine owner met her at the stage station and escorted her to his house, where she was given the same room that Catherine had occupied months earlier. Morrison's undercover work revealed the full extent of Blackwood's psychological manipulation. He began his campaign of terror almost immediately, showing her the personal belongings of previous victims and explaining in chilling detail what had happened to them. His goal was clearly to break down her resistance and to enjoy her fear before finally killing her. What Blackwood did not know was that Morrison's hidden recording devices were capturing every word of his confessions. The mine owner, believing he was in complete control of the situation, revealed details about his crimes that provided federal authorities with the evidence they needed for prosecution. The recordings captured Blackwood's descriptions of how he had killed Catherine and the other victims, how he had disposed of their bodies in the mine shafts, and how he had covered up their disappearances. He spoke with pride about his ability to manipulate the women's emotions and with satisfaction about the terror he had inflicted upon them. Morrison's investigation also revealed the existence of accomplices who had helped Blackwood carry out his crimes. The stage driver, the telegraph operator, and several of Blackwood's mine workers had all been involved in various aspects of the operation. Some had been paid for their cooperation, while others had been coerced through threats or blackmail. The federal operation to arrest Blackwood and his accomplices was carried out on May 20, 1882, just 5 days after Morrison's arrival in Silver Creek. Federal marshals surrounded the town and moved simultaneously to arrest all the suspects, preventing any of them from escaping or destroying evidence. Blackwood's arrest came as a complete shock to most of the townspeople, who had no idea of the crimes that had been taking place in their community. The mine owner's reputation as a respectable businessman and pillar of the community made the accusations seem almost impossible to believe. However, the evidence against Blackwood was overwhelming. In addition to the recorded confessions, federal agents found physical evidence in his house, including personal belongings from multiple victims and detailed records of his correspondence with dozens of women. The search of his mine revealed human remains in several of the deepest shafts, confirming the worst fears about what had happened to his victims. The trial of Jeremiah Blackwood became one of the most sensational criminal cases in Montana Territory's history. The evidence presented by federal prosecutors painted a picture of systematic murder that shocked even hardened frontier residents. The recordings of Blackwood's confessions were played in court, allowing the jury to hear his own words describing his crimes. The testimony of Dr. Henley was particularly damaging to Blackwood's defense. The doctor's detailed journal entries and his account of his investigation provided a comprehensive picture of how the crimes had been carried out and covered up. His courage in gathering evidence and working with federal authorities was praised by prosecutors and the press. Agent Morrison's testimony about her undercover work revealed the psychological methods that Blackwood had used to terrorize his victims. Her account of his behavior during her time in Silver Creek showed the jury the calculating nature of his crimes and the pleasure he derived from inflicting suffering. The trial also revealed the extent of the corruption that had allowed Blackwood's crimes to continue for so long. Several town officials were implicated in the cover-up, including the sheriff who had failed to properly investigate the disappearances, and the mayor who had accepted bribes to suppress inquiries from outside authorities. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a verdict of guilty on all charges. Blackwood was sentenced to death by hanging, a sentence that was carried out on September 15, 1882, just 4 months after his arrest. His execution was attended by hundreds of people, including family members of some of his victims who had traveled to Montana to see justice done. The aftermath of the Blackwood case had far-reaching consequences for Silver Creek and the broader territory. The town's reputation was permanently damaged by the revelations about the crimes that had taken place there, and many residents left for other communities. The silver mine was eventually abandoned, as workers refused to continue laboring in what they now knew was a mass grave. The case also led to significant changes in how mail-order bride arrangements were regulated and monitored. Federal authorities established new procedures for tracking the movement of women who traveled to remote areas to marry men they had never met. Newspapers were required to verify the identities of men who placed advertisements seeking brides, and transportation companies were instructed to report any suspicious patterns in passenger travel. Dr. Henley continued to practice medicine in Silver Creek for several more years, but the experience had changed him profoundly. His journal entries from the post-trial period reveal a man haunted by the knowledge of what had taken place in his community, and by his own role in allowing it to continue for so long. "I cannot escape the feeling that I could have acted sooner," he wrote, "and that my delay may have cost additional lives. The weight of this knowledge will stay with me for the rest of my days. I pray that the changes we have brought about will prevent such horrors from occurring again." The story of Catherine Whitmore and the other victims of Jeremiah Blackwood became part of the folklore of the American West, though the full details were not widely known for many years. The case was used by reformers and women's rights advocates to highlight the dangers faced by women who sought independence and opportunity on the frontier. The personal belongings of Blackwood's victims, recovered during the investigation, were eventually returned to their families when possible. Catherine's diary was sent to the friend in Illinois who had received her final letter, and it became an important historical document that provided insight into the experiences of mail-order brides in the territorial period. The site of Blackwood's house in Silver Creek was eventually demolished, and the land was left vacant for decades. Local residents reported strange occurrences in the area, including unexplained sounds and apparitions, though these accounts were likely influenced by knowledge of what had taken place there. The silver mine where the victims' bodies had been disposed of was permanently sealed by federal authorities, both to prevent further contamination of the site and to serve as a memorial to those who had died there. A small marker was eventually placed near the entrance, bearing the names of the known victims and acknowledging the tragedy that had occurred. The case continued to influence law enforcement practices and legal procedures for decades after Blackwood's execution. The methods used by Dr. Henley and federal agents to gather evidence and build their case became models for investigating similar crimes in remote areas where local authorities might be compromised. The psychological profile of Blackwood that emerged from the investigation also contributed to the development of early criminal psychology. His systematic approach to selecting and manipulating victims, combined with his apparent enjoyment of their suffering, provided insights into the minds of serial killers that would prove valuable to future investigators. The story of the mail-order bride who never reached her wedding night serves as a reminder of the dangers that faced women seeking independence and opportunity in the American West. Catherine Whitmore and the other victims of Jeremiah Blackwood were brave women who risked everything for the chance at a better life, only to encounter evil in a place where they had hoped to find love and security. Their tragedy also highlights the importance of vigilance and courage in the face of evil. Dr. Henley's decision to investigate his suspicions and to work with federal authorities, despite the personal risks involved, ultimately brought justice for the victims and prevented additional murders. The case remains relevant today as an example of how predators can exploit systems designed to help vulnerable people, and how communities can become complicit in evil through willful blindness or corruption. The story of Silver Creek serves as a warning about the importance of protecting those who seek help and opportunity, and about the need for strong institutions that can respond to injustice even in remote and isolated areas. As we reflect on this dark chapter in the history of the American West, we are reminded that the frontier was not just a place of opportunity and adventure, but also a place where the absence of strong social institutions could allow evil to flourish. The courage of those who fought against that evil, like Dr. Henley and Agent Morrison, provides inspiration for our own efforts to protect the vulnerable and to ensure that justice prevails even in the most difficult circumstances. The mail-order brides who traveled to places like Silver Creek were pioneers in their own right, seeking independence and opportunity in a world that offered few options for women. Their stories, both tragic and inspiring, remind us of the ongoing struggle for equality and justice that continues to this day. The legacy of Catherine Whitmore and the other victims of Jeremiah Blackwood lives on in the reforms that followed their deaths, and in the reminder they provide that individual courage can make a difference even in the face of overwhelming evil. Their story serves as both a warning about the dangers that can lurk behind respectable facades and an inspiration for those who refuse to remain silent in the face of injustice. In the end, the macabre story of the mail-order bride who never reached her wedding night is more than just a tale of frontier horror. It is a story about the human capacity for both evil and good, about the importance of courage in the face of danger, and about the ongoing struggle to create a world where the vulnerable are protected and justice prevails. The women who died in Silver Creek may never have found the love and security they sought, but their deaths were not in vain if they served to prevent similar tragedies and to inspire others to stand up against evil wherever it may be found. The investigation that followed Blackwood's execution revealed even more disturbing details about the scope of his crimes. Federal agents, working with territorial authorities, discovered that the mail-order bride murders were just one part of a larger criminal enterprise that had been operating throughout the Montana Territory for several years. Records found in Blackwood's personal safe revealed connections to a network of criminals who specialized in preying on vulnerable women traveling west. This network included stage drivers, hotel operators, and even some law enforcement officials who had been paid to look the other way when women disappeared under suspicious circumstances. The most shocking discovery came when agents found correspondence between Blackwood and similar operators in other territories. These letters revealed that the mail-order bride scheme had been replicated in remote mining towns across the West, with each operator sharing information about methods and potential victims. One letter, dated just weeks before Blackwood's arrest, contained a chilling proposal from an associate in Colorado Territory. "The harvest has been good this season," the letter read, "but we must be more careful about selection. The federal authorities are becoming more suspicious of missing persons reports. Perhaps we should consider expanding our operations to include widows seeking new starts, as they often have more resources and fewer people likely to search for them." This discovery prompted a massive federal investigation that eventually uncovered similar operations in 7 different territories. The scope of the crimes was staggering, with evidence suggesting that hundreds of women had been murdered by this network over a period of nearly a decade. The investigation also revealed the sophisticated methods used by these criminals to avoid detection. They maintained detailed records of law enforcement personnel who could be bribed or intimidated, tracked the movements of federal agents who might be investigating missing persons cases, and even had contacts within newspaper offices who could suppress stories about disappearances. Dr. Henley's journal entries from this period reveal his horror at learning the true extent of the crimes that had been taking place. "I had thought Jeremiah was a lone monster," he wrote, "but now I realize he was part of something far more sinister. The evil we uncovered in Silver Creek was just one tentacle of a vast creature that had been feeding on innocent women across the entire frontier." The doctor's continued investigation, now working directly with federal authorities, helped to expose the full network. His medical knowledge proved invaluable in examining evidence and in understanding the methods used by the killers. More importantly, his position as a respected member of the community allowed him to gather information that might not have been available to outside investigators. One of the most significant discoveries came when Dr. Henley found evidence that Blackwood had been keeping detailed records of his victims' final moments. Hidden in a secret compartment in his study were journals that contained graphic descriptions of each murder, written in a code that took federal cryptographers weeks to decipher. These journals revealed the true depth of Blackwood's depravity. He had not simply killed his victims for financial gain, but had tortured them psychologically and physically for his own pleasure. The entries described in horrifying detail how he had broken down each woman's spirit before finally ending her life. The journal entries about Catherine Whitmore were particularly disturbing. Blackwood had written extensively about her intelligence and spirit, describing how he had enjoyed the process of destroying her hope and confidence. He had kept her alive for 3 days after her supposed disappearance, during which time he had subjected her to psychological torture, designed to break her will completely. The discovery of these journals provided federal prosecutors with additional evidence for posthumous charges against Blackwood's accomplices, several of whom had escaped initial prosecution. The detailed descriptions of their roles in the crimes led to additional arrests and convictions that helped to dismantle the entire network. Agent Morrison, who had played such a crucial role in Blackwood's capture, continued to work on the broader investigation. Her experience in Silver Creek had given her unique insights into the methods used by these criminals, and she became one of the federal government's leading experts on crimes against women in frontier territories. Morrison's reports to her superiors revealed the systematic nature of the crimes and the sophisticated organization behind them. "These are not random acts of violence," she wrote, "but carefully planned operations designed to exploit the vulnerabilities of women seeking better lives in the West. The criminals involved have studied their victims' psychology and have developed methods that are both efficient and difficult to detect." The agent's work led to significant changes in how federal authorities approached missing persons cases in the territories. New protocols were established for investigating disappearances, particularly those involving women who had traveled to remote areas to marry men they had never met. The investigation also revealed the role that social attitudes had played in allowing these crimes to continue. The prevailing belief that women who traveled alone to marry strangers were somehow morally suspect had made law enforcement officials less likely to take their disappearances seriously. This attitude was reflected in newspaper coverage of the early disappearances, which often implied that the women had brought their fate upon themselves by engaging in such unconventional arrangements. Federal investigators found that this social prejudice had been deliberately exploited by the criminal network to discourage serious investigation of their crimes. The testimony of survivors from other parts of the network provided additional insights into the criminals' methods. Several women who had escaped from similar situations came forward after Blackwood's arrest, providing accounts that helped federal agents understand how the operations worked and how they could be prevented in the future. One survivor, a woman named Elizabeth Harper, who had escaped from a similar situation in Colorado Territory, provided particularly valuable testimony. Her account revealed that the criminals used a sophisticated system of psychological manipulation that began with the initial correspondence and continued through the victim's arrival and captivity. "They study you like a scientist studies a specimen," Harper testified. "Every letter you write gives them information about your fears, your hopes, your weaknesses. By the time you arrive, they know exactly how to control you. They know what threats will frighten you most, what promises will give you hope, and what methods will break your spirit most efficiently." Harper's testimony also revealed that the criminals often kept their victims alive for extended periods, not just for their own pleasure, but to extract information about other potential victims. Women were forced to write letters to friends and family members, providing the criminals with new targets for their schemes. The investigation uncovered evidence that this information had been used to expand the criminal network's operations. Names and addresses found in victims' personal effects had been used to identify and target their friends and relatives, creating a web of victimization that spread far beyond the original crimes. The psychological impact of these revelations on the communities where the crimes had taken place was profound. Residents of Silver Creek and other affected towns struggled to understand how such evil could have existed in their midst without their knowledge. Many people reported feeling guilty about their failure to recognize the signs of what was happening. Mrs. Patterson, the store owner who had befriended Catherine, was particularly affected by the revelations about what had really happened to the young woman. "I keep thinking about our last conversation," she told investigators. "She was trying to tell me something was wrong, but I didn't listen. I thought she was just nervous about getting married. If I had paid more attention, Maybe I could have saved her. The guilt felt by community members was compounded by the discovery that some of their neighbors had been complicit in the crimes. The revelation that trusted figures like the stage driver and telegraph operator had been part of the criminal network shattered many people's faith in their community. Dr. Henley's journal entries from this period reveal his own struggle with guilt and responsibility. Despite his crucial role in exposing the crimes, he continued to blame himself for not acting sooner. "I knew something was wrong," he wrote, "but I allowed my friendship with Jeremiah to cloud my judgment. How many women might still be alive if I had trusted my instincts earlier?" The doctor's guilt was shared by many others who had known Blackwood personally. The mine owner had been skilled at maintaining his facade of respectability, and many people who had considered him a friend struggled to reconcile their memories of him with the reality of his crimes. The trial transcripts reveal that Blackwood himself showed no remorse for his actions, even when faced with overwhelming evidence of his guilt. His testimony was marked by a cold detachment that chilled everyone in the courtroom. When asked about his victims, he referred to them as merchandise and inventory, showing a complete lack of recognition of their humanity. This dehumanization of his victims was identified by early criminal psychologists as a key factor in Blackwood's ability to commit such horrific crimes. His capacity to view women as objects rather than people had allowed him to torture and kill them without experiencing normal human emotions like empathy or guilt. The psychological analysis of Blackwood conducted after his conviction provided valuable insights that would influence the study of criminal behavior for decades. His case became one of the first documented examples of what would later be classified as psychopathic personality disorder, and his methods were studied by researchers seeking to understand how such individuals operate. The investigation also revealed the economic factors that had contributed to the crimes. The isolation of frontier communities and the scarcity of women in mining towns had created a market for mail-order bride arrangements that criminals had learned to exploit. Federal authorities found that legitimate mail-order bride services had been operating alongside the criminal network, making it difficult for potential victims to distinguish between honest opportunities and deadly traps. This discovery led to new regulations governing such services and requirements for verification of advertisers' identities and backgrounds. The changes implemented as a result of the investigation had a lasting impact on how women's safety was protected in frontier territories. New laws were passed requiring background checks for men seeking mail-order brides, and transportation companies were required to maintain detailed records of passengers traveling to remote areas. The investigation also led to improvements in communication between different law enforcement agencies. The discovery that the criminal network had operated across multiple territories highlighted the need for better coordination between federal, territorial, and local authorities. Agent Morrison's recommendations for preventing similar crimes included the establishment of a federal bureau specifically dedicated to investigating crimes against women in frontier areas. While this recommendation was not immediately implemented, it laid the groundwork for future developments in federal law enforcement. The broader social impact of the case extended far beyond law enforcement and legal changes. The revelations about the systematic targeting of vulnerable women sparked a national conversation about women's rights and safety that contributed to the early women's rights movement. Reformers used the case to argue for greater legal protections for women and for changes in social attitudes that made women more vulnerable to exploitation. The story of Catherine Whitmore and the other victims became a rallying cry for those seeking to improve women's status in American society. The case also influenced literature and popular culture of the era. Several novels were written based on the events in Silver Creek, though most sensationalized the story and failed to capture the true horror of what had taken place. These fictional accounts often focused on the romance and adventure aspects of mail-order bride arrangements, while ignoring the real dangers that women faced. Dr. Henley, disturbed by these romanticized portrayals, wrote his own account of the events, based on his journal entries and his investigation. His book, published in 1885, provided a more accurate and sobering picture of the crimes and their impact on the victims and their communities. The doctor's book became an important historical document and was used by researchers and law enforcement officials for decades. His detailed descriptions of Blackwood's methods and the investigation that exposed them provided valuable information for preventing similar crimes. The book also served as a memorial to the victims, providing detailed accounts of their lives and dreams that helped to restore their humanity after Blackwood's dehumanizing treatment. Dr. Henley's compassionate portrayal of Catherine and the other women helped readers understand the real human cost of the crimes. The impact of the case on mail-order bride arrangements was significant but complex. While the revelations about the criminal network made many people more suspicious of such arrangements, they did not eliminate the legitimate need for such services in frontier communities where women were scarce. Instead, the case led to the development of more regulated and safer systems for connecting men and women across long distances. Churches and other reputable organizations began to play a larger role in facilitating such arrangements, providing oversight and verification that helped to protect potential brides. The story of Silver Creek also influenced the development of frontier towns and mining communities. The revelation that isolation and lack of oversight could allow such crimes to flourish led to efforts to establish stronger institutions and better communication with outside authorities. Many communities implemented new policies requiring regular visits from federal officials and establishing better record-keeping systems for tracking the movement of people into and out of their areas. These changes helped to prevent the kind of systematic exploitation that had taken place in Silver Creek. The legacy of Catherine Whitmore and the other victims extended beyond the immediate changes their deaths brought about. Their story became part of the collective memory of the American West, serving as a reminder of the dangers that had faced women seeking opportunity and independence on the frontier. Memorial services were held for the victims in several cities, and their names were inscribed on monuments dedicated to women who had died seeking better lives in the West. These memorials served both to honor their memory and to educate future generations about the real history of frontier life. The case also influenced the development of women's organizations dedicated to protecting vulnerable women and advocating for their rights. Several groups were formed specifically in response to the revelations about the mail-order bride murders, and these organizations played important roles in advancing women's rights throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The investigation's impact on federal law enforcement was equally significant. The success of the multi-territorial investigation demonstrated the need for better coordination between different agencies and led to the development of new protocols for handling crimes that crossed jurisdictional boundaries. Agent Morrison's work on the case helped to establish her as one of the first female federal investigators, and her success paved the way for other women to enter law enforcement careers. Her methods and insights influenced the development of investigative techniques that would be used for decades. The case also contributed to the development of criminal psychology as a field of study. The detailed documentation of Blackwood's methods and motivations provided researchers with valuable data about the minds of serial killers and helped to establish patterns that would be used to identify and capture similar criminals in the future. The preservation of evidence from the case, including Dr. Henley's journals, Agent Morrison's reports, and the various documents found in Blackwood's possession, created an invaluable archive for researchers studying frontier crime and the development of law enforcement techniques. This archive continued to be consulted by investigators and researchers well into the 20th century, and many of the insights gained from studying the case influenced the development of modern criminal investigation methods. The story of the mail-order bride who never reached her wedding night ultimately became more than just a tale of frontier horror. It became a catalyst for change that improved the safety and rights of women throughout the American West and beyond. The courage of Dr. Henley in investigating his suspicions, the bravery of Agent Morrison in going undercover to gather evidence, and the determination of federal authorities to pursue justice across territorial boundaries all contributed to a victory over evil that had far-reaching consequences. Most importantly, the case ensured that Catherine Whitmore and the other victims were not forgotten. Their deaths, while tragic, led to changes that saved countless other lives and helped to create a safer and more just society for the women who followed in their footsteps. The lessons of Silver Creek remain relevant today, reminding us of the importance of vigilance against those who would exploit the vulnerable, the need for strong institutions to protect the innocent, and the power of individual courage to make a difference in the fight against evil. As we remember Catherine Whitmore and the other brave women who lost their lives in pursuit of better futures, we honor their memory by continuing to work for a world where all people can seek opportunity and happiness, without fear of those who would prey upon their hopes and dreams. Their story serves as both a warning about the dangers that can lurk behind respectable facades and an inspiration for those who refuse to remain silent in the face of injustice. In the end, the mail-order bride who never reached her wedding night achieved something far more important than the happiness she sought. She helped to create a legacy of justice that continues to protect others to this day. The final chapter of this horrific tale would not be written until decades later, when the last secrets of Silver Creek were finally revealed. In 1923, 41 years after Jeremiah Blackwood's execution, a mining company attempting to reopen the abandoned silver mine made a discovery that would forever change how the world understood the true scope of his crimes. Deep in the sealed shafts where federal agents had found evidence of Blackwood's victims, workers uncovered a hidden chamber that had been missed during the original investigation. Inside this chamber, preserved by the dry mountain air, they found the personal effects of more than 20 women, along with a detailed journal written in Blackwood's own hand. This journal, which came to be known as the Silver Creek Confessions, revealed that Blackwood's crimes had begun years before anyone had suspected and had claimed far more victims than the federal investigation had uncovered. The mine owner had been methodically documenting his murders, recording not just the details of each killing, but also his psychological observations about his victims and his own motivations. The journal entries painted a picture of a man who had become increasingly obsessed with the power he held over the women who came to him seeking love and security. He wrote extensively about the pleasure he derived from their terror and despair, describing in clinical detail how he had refined his methods over time to maximize their suffering. Perhaps most disturbing were Blackwood's reflections on the community of Silver Creek and how easily he had been able to operate under their noses. He expressed contempt for the townspeople who had accepted his explanations for the disappearances, and pride in his ability to maintain his respectable facade while committing such heinous crimes. "They see what they wish to see," he wrote in one entry. "A successful businessman, a pillar of the community, a man worthy of their respect and admiration. They cannot conceive that such a man could be capable of the acts I perform in the darkness of my mine. Their blindness is my greatest protection." The discovery of this journal prompted a new investigation that revealed the true extent of Blackwood's network of accomplices and the corruption that had enabled his crimes. Several prominent citizens of Silver Creek, including the former mayor and sheriff, were posthumously implicated in the cover-up, their reputations forever tarnished by their association with the monster they had helped to protect. The journal also provided closure for families who had never known what happened to their daughters and sisters who had disappeared while traveling to marry men they had met through correspondence. The detailed records allowed investigators to identify victims whose fates had previously been unknown and to notify their families of what had occurred. Among the most poignant discoveries was a letter that Catherine Whitmore had written but never sent, found among her personal effects in the hidden chamber. In this letter, addressed to her friend in Illinois, Catherine had described her growing fears about Blackwood and her suspicions about the fate of the women who had come before her. "I fear I have made a terrible mistake in coming here," she wrote. "There is something in Mr. Blackwood's eyes that speaks of darkness and cruelty. I have found evidence that other women have been here before me, yet none of the townspeople seem to remember them. I pray that I am wrong about my suspicions, but if something should happen to me, please know that I tried to escape, but found no way to do so. The letter served as a final testament to Catherine's courage and intelligence, and as a reminder of how close she had come to exposing Blackwood's crimes before becoming his victim. Her words, written in the shadow of her own impending death, provided a voice for all the women who had suffered at Blackwood's hands. The revelation of the full scope of Blackwood's crimes led to significant changes in how law enforcement agencies investigated missing persons cases, particularly those involving women who had traveled to remote areas. The case became a textbook example of how serial killers could exploit social systems and community blind spots to operate undetected for extended periods. Dr. Henley, who had died in 1919, was posthumously honored for his courage in investigating Blackwood's crimes and working with federal authorities to bring him to justice. A memorial was erected in Silver Creek acknowledging his role in stopping the murders and ensuring that the victims received some measure of justice. The town of Silver Creek itself never recovered from the scandal. By 1930, it had become a ghost town, its buildings abandoned and its streets empty. The harsh winters and the memories of what had taken place there proved too much for the remaining residents, who gradually moved away to start new lives elsewhere. Today, little remains of Silver Creek except for a few crumbling foundations and the sealed entrance to the silver mine where so many innocent women met their deaths. The site has become a place of pilgrimage for those interested in the darker chapters of American history, and a reminder of the importance of vigilance against evil in all its forms. The story of Catherine Whitmore and the other victims of Jeremiah Blackwood continues to resonate more than a century after their deaths. Their tragedy serves as a warning about the dangers that can lurk behind respectable facades and the importance of protecting those who seek help and opportunity in unfamiliar places. Their legacy also lives on in the reforms that followed their deaths, in the improved procedures for investigating missing persons cases, and in the greater awareness of how predators can exploit systems designed to help vulnerable people. The courage of Dr. Henley and Agent Morrison in bringing Blackwood to justice provides inspiration for those who refuse to remain silent in the face of evil. As we conclude this dark tale from the American frontier, we are reminded that the price of safety and justice is eternal vigilance. The women who died in Silver Creek sought nothing more than the chance for love, security, and a better life. Their deaths were a tragedy, but their memory serves as a call to action for all of us to protect the vulnerable and to ensure that such horrors are never allowed to occur again. The mail-order bride who never reached her wedding night, and all the others who shared her fate, may be gone, but they are not forgotten. Their story stands as a testament to the human capacity for both evil and good, and as a reminder that in the struggle between darkness and light, we must always choose to stand on the side of justice, no matter the cost. In the windswept ruins of Silver Creek, where the mountain winds still whisper through the abandoned buildings, the spirits of Catherine Whitmore and her fellow victims have finally found peace. Their story has been told, their killer has faced justice, and their memory serves as a guardian against the darkness that once ruled in that remote valley. The macabre story of the mail-order bride who never reached her wedding night is finally complete, but its lessons will endure as long as there are those who remember the importance of protecting the innocent and standing against evil in all its forms.